Thank you, everybody, and it's great to be here on the India Advantage Summit. I'm going to talk about circular economies today, and my Japanese colleagues have got a very interesting way of putting this across. There's this Japanese term called mottainai, which essentially very loosely translates to it's a waste if you do not realize the true potential of the product before you actually put it out on waste. Building up on that, of course, we have seen the linear supply chains. We have seen how linear supply chains are a little different from what we want to achieve or what we want to get to. Circularity is something that everybody has spoken about. Jaideep, you spoke about the huge circularity gap that we see in this world today. And just to build a little bit on that, in terms of opportunities, we have got immense opportunities in the circularity space. For India alone, we believe that circular economy can actually bring in a value of $624 billion by 2050 alone. And that's, of course, the monetary value of it. If I could even look at the sustainability aspect, it can actually reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 44%. And that's a huge number, right? Globally, it's a $4.5 trillion market that we are looking at. And the 91% circularity gap that we are talking about today. It's a huge gap to fill, right? Only 9% of the products that we are using today are actually getting recycled, refurbished, reused. The impact that something like this is going to create, and before that, if you really look at the amount of extraction that we are doing from Earth in India, it's actually 2.5 times the global average. The global average itself, what we saw from Avi, was really huge. On top of that, if we are already at 2.5 times the global average, I think we have got a lot of catching up to do there. In terms of impact, it is suggested that if we could achieve around 80 to 85% of circular economy, by 2050, the mobile phone cost that we are seeing today can actually be reduced by 50%. And that's a huge number. And I'm not just talking about the impact that a cheap technology could do for us. For a country like India, it could help bridge that digital divide also to a very large extent. If top 5 sectors in India alone embrace circular economy, it can create 4.4 million jobs. So that's a huge market, that's a huge societal pressure that we have on ourselves to ensure that more and more circularity is brought in. But while it's a good thing, circular economy comes up with a lot of challenges in itself. So I'm going to talk about a few of them here, and these are by no means an exhaustive list of challenges that the economy or that circularity comes with. First of all, you need to have a circular design, right? If a lot of your products go on to waste, it's actually also a design failure. So you need to make sure that these manufacturing practices that we have are making use of sustainable material. The products that we have got a more reliable design. They have got a design which is easy to repair so that you don't just end up throwing the products without actually giving a repair service to that as well. And of course, the product life cycle extension. We have seen companies making smartphones, we've seen companies making devices which do not have a software services that are going to be provided to it in 2 years, 3 years time frame. Even if the phone is working good, you essentially have to leave that phone because a lot of the new softwares that you want to use on that phone or on that laptop or on that device would not actually run. So how do you make sure that when you're designing a product, you have that circularity, that circular thought process in your mind as well? Asset tracking. Circular economy does not only talk about recycling, it has got all the 4 R services that we talk about it today: recycling, refurbishing, reuse, and remanufacturing. A lot of this reuse that we talk about in terms of the sharing economy, it is absolutely important for you to have a very good visibility about the product through its lifetime. So what I'm essentially talking about is if you could track that product throughout its lifetime, if you could understand what has been the utilization of that product throughout its lifetime, that's something that's going to help you build the circular economy as well. Incentivization. Nothing in this world actually runs without incentive, right? If I have to ensure that circularity is brought in, you need to have incentivization models that ensure that each and everybody who is a part of this usage cycle does ensure that the product goes back in the circular flow. A lot of Indian companies are already doing that. You already have massive discounts that are given to you when you give your old phone back and you buy a new phone. That's a good model for a lot of tech space. But in case if there is a product that you do not intend to buy in an immediate future, but you have an old product at your home that you want to recycle or refurbish, how do you go about doing that? And that brings me to the next point, which is setting up reverse cycles. How do you manage the reverse logistics? It's way more complicated than it may seem. Forward logistics is something that our industry is very nicely designed for. We are very good at ensuring that the products reach the customer on time at the lowest cost. What we have not figured out to the best extent possible yet is how do you get those products back once those products reach their end of life. And setting up a circular economy is absolutely important. It requires that you have those reverse cycles also planned. End of life management. Assuming you have got everything on the list that I have here sorted out, and now you have to ensure that once the product has reached its end of life, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to recycle, refurbish? So you do not want to recycle everything. We saw it from the presentation earlier that recycling is just essentially delaying the process of putting it back to earth, right? You want to ensure that the overall lifetime is extended. EV batteries that we see today, there is a very strong potential for these EV batteries. Once they reach a stage where they cannot be used in vehicles, they can actually be used to power inverters at small homes in India as well. So that's a second life use case for these products. So what do you want to do with these products once you reach the end of life for these products? That's another challenge that we need to figure out. Today we do not have enough data because circular economy is still, as much as we may speak, it's still a relatively new technology, new concept. We do not have enough data to really talk about how much and how to go about recycling, refurbishing these products. And coming to the high-tech part of the story, blockchain essentially happens to be a technology that does help you solve a lot of these problems to a large extent. One, it solves the traceability problem to a very good extent. It allows you to create a unique digital asset for that product, and the asset lifetime of that product can be traced, tracked throughout its lifetime. What this also means is, since cryptocurrencies and crypto tokens allow you to provide small levels of incentivizations, you can have those models also built in to take care of the customer incentivization or a consumer incentivization along with the incentivization for the 4R service providers. So all put together, I'm not saying blockchain is the answer to this. Any technology, if there are enough number of people who want the technology to fail, it's definitely going to fail. So we need to have more and more people who believe in this, and there's no silver bullet to this. Blockchain is one of the ways in which you can have a traceability for that product up to its end of life, and that could actually help you track that product and ensure that there is a more sustainable action that's taken on that product once it reaches the end of life. I'm going to talk about a case study here. This is something that we did for a leading automotive OEM based out of North America. And this is about high-value plastic parts. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, I come from the mobility space. The amount of plastics that are being used in the automotive from 2014 to 2020, there's actually been a 75% increase in terms of plastic. An average car that is manufactured in India uses around 350 kgs of plastic. Well, what I also believe is plastic is probably one of the best inventions that humans have had. Unfortunately, on the flip side, it's also the worst invention that we have had. It's the best invention because, one, it's lightweight, easy to mold. It provides you a strength almost equivalent to that of a metal. And a lot of these things are a big pro when you're manufacturing a car, right? You want products, while it is around 350 kgs and around 50% of the total car, the overall weight for a plastic component in a car is just 10 to 12%. What it leads to is an improved fuel efficiency. So there are two ways we could deal with this problem. One is plastic is bad. Let's reduce the plastic to whatever extent possible. But in that case, we are depriving the humankind of one of the best inventions that we have had. The other way is to deal with it more sustainably. How do you ensure that you manufacture just as much as you would need? And one way of doing that is to maintain traceability for the high-value plastic parts in the automotive component. Right from the point where the plastic is molded and reaches a point where you can create a digital identity for that asset, you want to track that product up to the point where it reaches the end of life at a scrapyard owner. You want to ensure that there is adequate incentive that is built in for that scrapyard owner so that this product is recycled and is brought back into the manufacturing process again. In that way, because it's a non-destructive component of the car, essentially you can plow back around 90-95% of the plastic that has been used in the car. What this means is we need to start thinking circular, right from the point where you design the product to the point where you discard the product at its end of life. And when we are doing that, there are two ways to approach this. One, of course, is the regulatory push, which we are already seeing, the kind of push that we see in the budget of 2022. We are definitely moving in the right direction. But the corporates and the organizations also need to come together. And when you're preparing a business case for a circular economy, you need to essentially look at three very important components. First, in circular economy, cost and revenues are always shared. So there's no one person, and rightly said, the easy and the most difficult part of sustainability is that there's no one person who can solve that problem. It requires a collaborative approach. Everybody has to come together. Everybody has to bring some solution on the table, or at least a commitment on the table that ensures that there is adequate sustainable measures that are taken up for the earth. Second is, of course, if the costs and revenues are shared, all the optimizations and the benefits that we are going to receive as a result of this are also going to be shared. And the third extremely important part is, because you are now extending the life of the product, you need to make sure that your business models, your revenue growth models are tied to that. You cannot look at selling the product today and marking the profits from that. The product is going to be in cycle for 7 years, 8 years, and you will probably, in the initial stages, also going to lose on some of your revenue, because people are not going to buy those smartphones every second year, right? People are not going to buy those cars every 5 years, 8 years. But in the long run, it's going to pay off. You will have revenue streams, new revenue streams that are going to come in from repair, refurbish, and companies need to capitalize on that as well. On the circular economy side, of course, the regulatory aspect is also equally important. The regulatory bodies need to set up clear benchmarks. And these benchmarks are not just about material recyclability. There have to be benchmarks about how are the design processes happening? What is the material composition of the design processes that are being set up? What are those sharing economies that regulatory bodies can push for? Second is incentivization. See, we are starting with the circular economy process. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have not reached that economies of scale where recycling, refurbishing is going to be extremely profitable. So some amount of subsidies, incentivizations need to constantly be put into the system so that these 4R services can provide those benefits and build up a strong business case for the organizations to invest on. And finally, I know I'm a little bit overshot my time, is around consumer awareness. You can never emphasize more on this. You need to have increased consumer awareness. If customers want brands which are more sustainable, it's going to be the strongest push for the companies to really invest in something like that. That being said, I think circular economy is the way forward. We really need to start focusing and start doing our bit to build the circular economy for the world. My final motto before I leave the dais is think circular, stay circular, and let's build this economy together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chandan. Great.